Alright, so this is the intro to the My Eyes edit. So my idea going into this was I wanted to show myself, but also have After Effects in the background just to show that this was made, by a person, because there's so much AI content going around lately that I wanted to make sure people knew this was made by me. And basically what I did was I was just holding my camera and I pretty much pulled it towards the monitor, and it wasn't the most perfect sort of pull. I didn't actually line it up correctly, but I'm going to show you how I fixed all that. And I have two comps here and I can show you how it actually seamlessly transitions. So I'm going to go through everything right now. And the first thing I did was I started off by warp stabilizing the clip. So I grabbed the original clip, which is this bottom layer, and I added warp stabilizer to it. So I did this in Premiere, but you can do this in After Effects. You just put on the warp stabilizer and it basically makes your camera movement a lot smoother. So you can see how smooth this looks. It's definitely a lot smoother than what it would be if it was just a handheld shot. And this is pretty much like the original footage that's just warp stabilized. And what I did from here was I just added lumetri color. And what this does, if I turn it off, you can see that when I get close, the monitor gets really bright. So what I did was I added a lumetri color and just messed with the highlights and the shadows there. And you can see that if I turn lumetri off and on, it just makes the monitors glow a lot less and makes them look a little bit nicer. And then from there, this is really where the magic happens. Now there's many ways to do this, but I had an adjustment layer. Now I'm just going to turn this adjustment layer on, and basically the only thing that's on this adjustment layer is just a linear color key. And this is pretty much an effect that's also in After Effects, and it pretty much keys out any color that you have in your composition. So I wanted to key out this color black, and so I set the key color to black. And then I actually got the pen tool and I just drew a mask for the adjustment layer. And if I press M, you can see the mask that I just drew, which is pink, but I'll delete that now. But I have this green mask here, and I drew this green mask, just a rectangle, and I keyframed the mask path. And you can see that as I zoom in, this green mask stays around this area that I want to key out, and it stays there the entire time. And that is made with these mask keyframes here, this mask path that I keyframed. Now the reason why the black disappears is because we have this linear color key effect on, but it's not actually taking place until the opacity keyframes come in. So these two keyframes here are the opacity keyframes, and you can see if I turn it to 0, the adjustment layer isn't doing anything because the adjustment layer has 0% opacity. But if we turn it to 100%, it has 100% opacity, and the linear color key is taking effect. I have this keyframe here set to 0, so it stays as a black screen because that's what it was in the original filming. And as it gets closer, I up the opacity all the way to 100%, and it gets rid of the original black screen in the recording. And this allows me to now put the edit into this section here. But I don't do it in this composition, but that's what I will do in a second here. And then the top layer here is just a color correction to myself. So if I just turn this layer on, you can see that I just brightened myself up a bit at the start of the edit. And if I just solo this layer, all I did was just rotor brush myself, and that's all this layer is. And all I did was just use a lumetri color to just brighten myself up. So this entire composition is 3 layers. It is myself, it is the adjustment layer that's getting rid of this black square, and it is also just the raw recording of the camera moving in and out. And then I put this composition into a new composition, and this composition now has 2 layers. Now this first layer is just this composition. So this first layer is everything that went on in this composition, but what I added at the bottom here, this bottom layer, is actually my edit. So if I solo this layer, you can see that it is just the 3D text edit in which I made the tutorial for. And basically, when this layer is fading out this screen here, it's actually allowing this layer at the bottom to be seen. So if I hide this bottom layer, you can see that we still just have everything that we talked about before. It's fading out into nothing, but now I've added this layer at the bottom, and this is now my edit, and this is where the edit plays, and that's what gives it that seamless transition. But you may have noticed that in this composition, right, when we zoom into the monitor, it's not actually zoomed into the middle, right? You can see that when we zoom into this monitor, it's not actually quite centered. In fact, we're kind of half on this screen and half on this screen. And what I did here is in this composition, this is where I correct all these imperfections. So first things first was I time remapped it so it was the right duration to match the song. But more importantly, what I did was I messed with the exposition. And basically you can see exactly here what the exposition is doing is it's moving so it looks like we're zooming right into the middle of the monitor, even though in this comp, we were actually well far off. So we weren't quite accurate with filming with the camera here, but we fixed it in here and we made it so we zoom right into the middle. So we used an exposition. We also used a scale because if I scale out, as you can see, I wanted to zoom in as well to sort of transition into the screen a bit cleaner. So I used exposition, scale, and I also used a little bit of rotation just to make it all line up a bit more evenly. And then we just used opacity to just keyframe out this layer. And that is exactly how I did this intro. So like I said, the original composition was me zooming in and it wasn't quite perfect. So what we did was we did the corrections in this composition and we made it so it zoomed right into the middle. And as it zooms into the middle, you can see that this layer slowly fades out with the opacity and the edit starts playing. So hopefully this breakdown helped you understand how I made this intro. And if you've got any questions, just let me know.